Hey guys, welcome to another. We're good. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of R-Rated Christianity. For those of you that join us on a regular basis, thank you. We really appreciate it. We hope you continue to enjoy the conversations and the exercise in critical thinking on biblical matters. And for those that may watch this new or down the road, or if you're watching for the first time tonight, welcome. This is an apologetics podcast. It comes from the Greek word apologia, to give an answer or a defense, actually, for why we believe what we believe, meaning why we have a biblical worldview, why we believe that Christianity is logically consistent, that Jesus is God incarnate, and why we can put our faith and trust in what Jesus did for us and who he is and where we're going when we leave this earth. So that's kind of what we do. We handle topics that maybe the church doesn't handle. The R stands for real, raw, and redemptive. We have real conversations about real topics, hopefully that are relevant, and also we do it in a raw way. Yes, we just talk like we would at a kitchen table or at a barbecue pit or something like that. We don't try to overly do it, but we just want to be authentic. But we ultimately do all this to show that our faith is real and that it leads people, like it's led us in the past, to a redemptive relationship with, as we say, a first century Jew named Jesus that we believe was God incarnate. So it's important stuff. Because we ultimately believe that was God, that the man hanging on the cross was God. That's what we believe. That's a Christian premise, that we believe that the historical figure that was hanging on that cross, over 2,000 years ago, was God incarnate. Then the second question I think has to be asked is, if you believe that, then what is God doing on the cross? And that's a whole theological discussion that we have to talk about, right? Yep. Okay, if that's God, if you believe that, and we believe the evidence, that the overwhelming, way more than preponderance of the evidence, substantiates, not my opinion. My opinion is based off objective evidence that I've studied over the years, is that person hanging on the cross, that man hanging on the cross, was God incarnate.
That's right.
Second question is, what's he doing on a cross? Those are deep theological questions that we've talked, not specifically like that, I think, presented that way, that we've talked about before on the podcast. But there's things that are competing for the real estate in our minds. We've always talked about this. We talk about it with young people. Our passion is young people. I speak to as many groups of young people as I can, including my daughter's friends are coming over again tomorrow night. We made a commitment, Davi and I did, my wife and I did, that we got 4 more years. Maya starts freshman year, like your youngest does too.
That's right.
Freshman year in college coming up here in about 4 or 5 weeks. And we got 4 years. I don't know where she's going to go to college. Unfortunately, she has to go to college. The colleges are so shitty these days, but
you've got time.
But there's time, and so 4 years to really shape, to make sure that we're going to press into her mind. I've always been worried but shocked in the past when we bring up that study of the 70 to 85% of Christian young people that go to college walk away from the Christian faith after a year. 1 year, and it's less than a year. I guess they took an average or however they did the study, but less than a year it takes to take away, to draw, and I don't even think they're kicking and screaming, to pry, to persuade, to influence a person away from this supposed deep-seated beliefs that they have in who God is and who Jesus is. And where we go after we leave this earth, and what is the definitions of right and wrong, and what is moral and what's right and what's immoral. These are it's a battle of definitions today in our society. And when you think about 70 to 85% of young people, forget about young people. You always bring up the study and the stats. 4% of the 63% of Americans that identify as Christians only believe in a biblical worldview. It sucks.
Right.
So you have to think to yourself, what the hell do we believe? And so when we talk about screen time today, you're probably thinking like screen time. What the hell are we talking about screen time? Well, there's something competing for our attention. Mm-hmm. We have so much time in a day. We have attention to give. You can't give your attention to more than one thing at a time, typically. You can multitask, but I'm talking about
undivided attention.
Undivided attention. Thank you, George. And you have the studies and the stats, I'm sure you'll share in a little while, on the screen time and how it's become truly a problem. There's a pandemic of screen time, and we know that with adults too, but especially young people. And it's shaping their mind and their thoughts. And then what's on that screen matters. Look, I don't have a problem per se with screen time. I'm just thinking it through when we were talking. It's what's on the screen. I mean, like we share, me, I'm not a reader person. I mean, I don't read. I'm not a voracious reader. Ferocious or voracious? What is the word?
Voracious?
Voracious? Is that a word? Okay.
Voracious, yeah.
Voracious reader, like you are. And I mean, I'm not. It's not a snag. I mean,
it's a clinical condition. I think
it's a compliment. But that's not me. So me, because I'm driving, I'm always in the middle of something. I mean, I'm a listener. So I listen and I watch. So I'll either watch something, and it's intellectual for me, and I can speed up the speed a little bit so I can get through it quicker. Like you speed read, I speed watch, and I retain it well. I speed here, and speed watch, but I retain it well.
The relationship is that there's a pretty good relationship between actually seeing something in short-term memory, but the relationship between reading something, holding a book in your hand, and processing it that way, and long-term memory is stronger.
What about people like me, like dumbasses like me, that when I'm reading, my mind goes somewhere else because my attention, I'm thinking
the same way.
I just and then I go, how did I get down to the bottom of this page? Yeah. What did I just read? And then I go back and read it again. I mean, I've seen you read shit. I mean, George is like, and switch. And you retain it well. Is it a focus thing for you? You don't get distracted. I mean,
I think it comes with. For me, it didn't come naturally when I was a kid. I mean, I'm prone to distractions as well, but it was a discipline that was developed because I had to. I had a tutor in Africa. If my parents are watching, his name was Nunj, and he developed in me. Let's just say he used negative reinforcement, but he developed in me a discipline of having to focus on the content in front of me. And I would read it, and we go page by page, I'd read it, and then I'd have to reproduce it back to him.
Oh, so you read slow at first.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I was distracted. Most kids are. Yeah. That's normal.
Well, look, I'm still distracted. Maybe I'm still a kid. So you're right. And maybe it is a discipline.
But I think that's the issue. Screen time is a source of, it's easier to get distracted because you can have multiple apps open. You can go from here to there.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's controllable. With a touch of a thumb, you're controlling realities. You're even controlling people. Like you're getting someone's response to you instantly.
Yeah.
Now, anyone who's been married more than a week knows that expectation is unrealistic. I don't get anything instantly from my wife on my demand. I mean, it's a relationship, right? I mean, people give feedback over time. That's normal. People have to process and think it's a real relationship. But when you're on a screen, these are fake people. You can literally turn them off. They can disappear if you don't like what they're doing, or if they're taking too long, you can just go to the next thing. I've actually watched people just even when they're not doing anything, then they'll put their phone in their pocket. Mm-hmm. They'll get all fidgety. They don't pull it up again and start doing the exact same thing. Fidgety. We just went on a trip. We were sitting on a shuttle between the airport and the rental station for our vehicle. And Jaden was sitting across from me, my 15-year-old, and there was a kid next to me, and he was his age. And I had just talked to Jaden about putting his damn phone away because he's doing this kind of stuff. Yeah. He's walking. He's got it on. Put it away. I hate it. And so I'm like a tyrant when it comes to that. Proudly so. But this kid is literally doing that. He's talking to his sister. While he's talking to his sister, he's doing this. He's giving her about 10% of his time, Nico.
Oh, yeah.
And then he's flipping back and forth. And then he goes from text. He goes from app. He goes from email. I mean, at the speed of light. Then there's nothing there. Then he puts it in his pocket. Quite literally 5 seconds later, pulls it out, does the exact same routine. Nothing new has happened. There's no flags of any new content.
True. That's true.
And the fidgetiness, and that has become clinical.
Yeah.
That's where we are today. Yeah. And there's enough time that's passed that we actually have data and we can say, holy crap.
Yeah, but the problem that worries, there's no turning back.
I don't think
it's only getting worse.
Screens are here to stay.
There's more shit going on. I mean, and there's more apps and there's more this, and I'm not a techie guy. You know, you know how many emails I have on my thing unread. And I don't email. If anybody says Nico emailed me, they're lying your ass. They're ass. I didn't email shit. I'm never going to have an email scandal. I mean, so texting is it. So all I'm saying is this is the future. I mean, it is the future. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, we drove to Knott's Berry Farm, and we drove to the Grand Canyon in an old big ass 1970 something, one of my pop's old tank vehicles.
Is it a station wagon?
It wasn't a station wagon because it was a 5-seater, and we were 5 in there. It was me, my pop,
and there was no huge brother, my older brother,
back row facing the back.
No. It was just and then it was a lawyer that was in my pop's office who later became a judge, and his son, Dante. And so we were like, it was this way all the way.
One of those huge ass Monte Carlo deals.
Yeah, big ass. I'll ask my pop.
Big ass trunk.
Yeah,
but not open
all
trunk.
I'm saying is, we were just talking. You're talking, and you're looking outside, and you're thinking, and That's you
Yeah.
had this imagination, you had wonder.
That's it.
We've lost our wonder and our imagination.
Yep.
And so all of these are distractions away from, but yet, and we can find data. So here's my thing. I wish that we could find a way. I wish we could find a way to be shrewd as a snake and innocent as a dove, and use these screen time and some of this stuff to get people to be just as interested about learning things of God and of the Bible.
Sure.
And so that's why I'm a big fan of some of these podcasts out there that I believe, not a lot of them, are doing good work. Whether you have, audiobooks, or if you can watch a presentation, like a presentation on some type of apologetics or something, and make it interesting, and I wish there was a Christian Joe Rogan show to where it was a long form that had a huge audience like that. How do you get there? I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people have put Christianity in this goofy, prude, you're sterile, plain, boring, bullshit box.
Yeah.
It's anything but the truth. You can't. I always tell people, you've got to work really hard to make the Bible boring. It's insane. I mean, it from Genesis, you study Judah and all the bullshit in Genesis, to Judges, to the New Testament. I mean, you talk sex, drugs, rock and roll. It's all in there. Fighting, stabbing, killing.
Yeah, you bet.
300 on steroids. I mean, it's fascinating to me. And God's navigating through all that crap, and Jesus navigates through all that shit. And it fascinated me, the realness and the history and the rawness of Scripture. And so I that's been our passion, is to make Christianity real to people. And it is raw. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you, look, you study this book with quit trying to sterilize it like so many people do. I mean,
properly read, properly studied. You can't put it down.
It understands the human condition. It's dealing with people and all their brokenness and all their flaws. And yes, I don't care what anybody says. The language is tough. The behavior is tough. The immorality, the sexuality, everything apart from God when people do crap on their own. Yes. And then here's God, navigating through all of our choice, our free agency, because He has to give it to us if He really loves us and wants a loving relationship back. He has to give us the option of stiff arming Him. He gives us that free agency, and He allows us to test the waters ourselves. That's what a parent does. All right. I always tell people, why I don't touch a pot that's red on a stove? It's because I touched the pot that was red on the stove and I burned the shit out of my hand. Yeah. All right. I mean, good decisions come from experience, as a friend of mine said. Yeah. And experience comes from bad decisions. There was a lieutenant in the Air Force that had that over his desk. It's true. Good decisions come from it. Now, I'm not saying go out there and make a bunch of shitty decisions so you can be smart. No, but it just kind of happens. It's a natural flow of life. Our job as parents is hopefully you don't make decisions so bad to where it derails you.
That's right.
That's the prayer.
Or you hit a point of no return.
Yes. I mean, because I deal with points of no return for a living in the justice system. So screen time is a big deal. So screen time, as George was saying before the show, screen time leads to literal illiteracy. Kids are not as intelligent as they used to be. Testosterone levels are down. Manhood is down. Morality is down. There's anarchy. We understand, confusion is up. Bunch of bullshit out there.
Handwriting sucks.
Everything. Nobody can do cursive. Yeah. Like our kids go to the school where they taught cursive. Our kids write cursive. Kids aren't taught cursive. Right. You're not taught to read. I mean,
and by intelligence, it's not that they're not naturally intelligent anymore. What we're saying is they're not communicatively or rhetorically intelligent. They can't carry a conversation because I actually have to look at you, Jeff, in the eye. And while I'm talking to you, I'm reading how maybe you're receiving what I'm saying. And I might have to adjust because you're making that constipated look in your face right now. What I'm saying, I'm just saying, my point is we communicate more than just words, right? This is why masks during the COVID drove me crazy because you're erasing a significant component of communication. Yeah. And children were denied that ability to do that. And now the data is out on how harmful that was. This is part of being human. And kids are just not able to do that anymore. And this is the point. The natural world is just too boring for the average teenager. So what's normal is it's unbearingly boring to the screen time addict. And the overwhelming majority of the teen population is screen time addicted. And so there's literally social research on this now. I mean, you can go back, and when was the iPhone released?
2007.
Okay, so 2007. So from 2007 until now, I mean, that's 16 years worth of data that we've been able to obtain, and been able to compare groups, people who have a certain amount of time on their screen versus people who don't, and we can actually see their ability to adapt. And it's called attachment theory in psychology. It's basically a theory that we either grow or we don't grow in terms of our attachments, the productive or mature or helpful relationships that we build over time. And so do we have those kinds of relationships? Are we creating appropriate and healthy attachments over time, or are we not? And you can literally see a decline in attachment health with an increase in screen time. And so there's just a lessening ability of among teens in particular to cope with the real world. They just can't unless they have this damn thing in their hand. It almost provides kind of almost like a Linus blanket effect.
Well, kids don't have any activities. I mean, we used to do all of our stuff outside. We were involved in stuff. Nobody sat behind a screen and just sat there and got the hunchback of Notre Dame syndrome. These kids have these humps. I mean, and I'm just being honest. I mean, we're talking about posture is horrible. Yep. Sitting is the new smoking, as they say. Yep. We weren't designed to sit at a 90-degree angle. You should be ass to grass, ass on your heels, or standing up. I mean, there was no 90-degree chairs. You sat on a rock and your knees. People took a dump. With their knees over. Their hips lower than their knees. I mean, we can look at third world countries that do that. And so we this posture and this slumping over and this kind of getting in a room and playing video games all day long. And I'm not saying that can't enjoy a video game here or there. I'm not saying all that stuff. All I'm saying is our attention we don't do anything. We're not studying. We're not growing our minds. We're not bettering our body. We're not doing things. I mean, we're not volunteering. And look, we're in a battle. I mean, we're in a battle for kids' attention. And how do we show them? Because usually people get open-minded to a biblical understanding when they go through a shitstorm. Because at some point you're like, man, I'm scared out of my mind. I'm going through something horrible. I made a terrible decision, or I'm in a bad circumstance, and I need to try something else. I'm open-minded to it. You get pain, like the pain of staying the same exceeds the pain of changing, as we say. You change, right? And so why does it have to get there? How can we make an appeal? Because I look at apologetics podcasts out there. I don't know all of them. I just try my best, and you look at, 30,000 views, 100-something thousand views, which is wonderful. They're not getting millions of views. They're not. That's all I'm saying. If a Joe Rogan or a Jordan Peterson would give their life to Christ and kept doing what they're doing, but would be more open about their faith, kind of like that guy, Patrick Bet-David. I like the work he does. He's a good critical thinker. And how do you make it more appealable is my point. That's what we try to do. And we do it on a small scale, our men's Bible study, doing the different, platforms that we have, but we have nowhere near the reach that these other people do. But if everybody has a little bit of reach, if the church was working as the church, and there was a bunch of, 2s and 3s and 4s going out there, and they had, 300 here and 200 there and 1,000 here and 10 here. And, that's how the gospel spread in the first place. They didn't have this bullshit in the old day. I mean, it was just 2 people going out and talking and preaching and setting up shop and talking about Jesus and living life differently. And it spread like wildfire.
And it grew on the ground.
Yeah. And so we've got to figure, I think we really need a Matthew 10:16 mindset of being shrewd as a snake and innocent as a dove, and really finding out this ain't going away and this isn't going to change. So how do we use it?
And we're not suggesting that it'll go away. We're not suggesting we shouldn't use it. The problem is
it's not. Yeah.
There's a fine line between using it in a productive way and actually developing an addiction. And we're at addiction levels right now. That's the dilemma we're facing right now. I don't know how. I don't know how we come back from that. But I think Christians should set the example, because what's happening is that the teen is and not just teens, adults have problems too.
In
In fact, it's in many cases, it's the parents' fault. The parents are okay with it. You go to a restaurant, you look at a family around the table. Parents are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
They're on their phone.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing is unbelievable addiction spikes as teens are concerned. And I think this comes down to the immediate like problem.
Yep.
That's the problem. And when they develop Facebook and when they develop Google, and when they develop any kind of interactive media, right, Jeff? I mean, they knew that there's something really addictive about the idea of doing something on social media and getting immediate feedback, getting an immediate like. Think about that. That's really powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, you actually get to know what someone is thinking right away. And real relationships just don't work that way, as we said at the top of the show. And so I don't know how you replace that unless you come at it from an identity discussion. I think that's what this ultimately is about. Where are you getting your identity? Because where you spend the most of your time is where you're going to get your sense of meaning, your sense of belonging, your sense of purpose, right? And this is and that's where you're going to try and get your answers to the big questions. Why am I here? Is there a God? If there was a God, why do we have suffering? Why do we have pain? Why do we have confusion? What's my purpose in life? What's the appropriate response of me to God? Who is God? I mean, those questions, you're going to social media to get them answered, and the kinds of the answers that are coming back aren't great. That's the point. So, how do Christians set the example? That's the question. How do we do that? And I think this is where it gets back to literacy. We don't know what we believe, so we don't know what solution to bring to the table. That's really the problem. There's been a precipitous decline in Bible reading. Now, we saw a huge spike downward during the COVID era. Surprise, surprise. But there's been a big drop. The American Bible Society in 2022, the State of the Bible report, I think I might have texted you a couple weeks ago about it. I don't know if you recall, they were freaking out because for the last 10 to 12 years, about 50% of Americans have read their Bible multiple times every single year, and that stayed pretty consistent. 50% isn't great. But suddenly, in 2021, it dropped like 11 or 12 points.
Wow.
It's down to 38, 39%. Even the most faithful Bible readers, and interestingly enough, that was around 10%, even those numbers dropped precipitously. So people just aren't reading their Bible, period. And they translate it to something like 26 to 30 million Americans less over the last 10 years that are reading their Bible less. So how do they know what they believe if they're not reading
because they're not persuaded. The reason why you don't read the Bible is the same reason why you stop watching a show, is because you're not interested in it anymore. And you don't believe it's an appeal to you. And so I believe people don't read the Bible, and you and I always say, don't just read the Bible, study the Bible, right? Because you can just read it and not really be better off for it
and pull out of it whatever you want.
Yeah. There's always going to be some benefit from reading the Bible, unless you're reading it to criticize it and to find something wrong with it. But all that I'm saying is that's where the church has fallen short. They don't teach the Bible. We don't have systematic theology taught.
No,
as you've been saying this for a long time.
We don't even know what that is.
We don't even know what that is. Actually, we don't know what we believe. So it's easy to allow the world to influence us versus us influence the world. The Great Commission is being marched out by the secular world onto the church instead of the other way around.
Yeah, the Bible is being rewritten.
Well,
and then brought back. So it's being rewritten out there and then brought back into the church.
But some people are literally doing that. I mean, they're taking out of the Bible and making it into what they want to. When you justify things that are antithetical to a biblical understanding, it's happening. I mean,
and the church, as a function of its cluelessness, is actually helping them do that. That's the point. The church isn't like pushing back or anything. They're not. They're bringing this stuff in. And we always talk about this. Today's student is ultimately going to become a pastor or a youth pastor or a church leader. That's happening. These secular institutions and even Christian institutions who are compromised are graduating people who are ultimately going to become tomorrow's pastors. So if you want to see what the church tomorrow looks like, I'm sorry, but look at the average American classroom. The silence. No, seriously. I mean, if you want to see what the church is going to look like a few years from now, look at the average American classroom. What is the condition of the average American classroom today? Pick your favorite American Christian university. I mean, here in the state of Texas, what would you say is probably the most well-known Christian university?
Christian University?
Yeah.
Liberty, I guess. I don't know.
Well, Liberty's over in Virginia.
What did you say?
Christian here in the state of Texas.
Oh, Texas.
Yeah.
What is that one up at Abilene?
Well, Abilene Christian, true enough, but Baylor. I was going to suggest Baylor.
Baylor, yeah.
Baylor,
but I don't even consider Baylor a Christian university.
Well, why?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, why? Because they're all over the news on point after point after point.
Yeah.
Christian distinctives, really walking away from this Christian distinctives. They won't even touch the issues of biblical sexuality. I mean, they've certainly on evolutionary thinking. They've I think done a real disservice on the topic of evolutionary biology, and evolutionary
Meaning
theory.
that they support it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you go, I think, in their Department of Natural Science and you pull up their ethos or you pull up their mission statement or whatever, you're going to see that they subscribe to the theory of common descent, which is really at the heart of evolution.
I'm assuming theistic evolution then.
No.
Or just evolution.
Just
God.
Just evolution.
Okay, well that's even worse.
No, I'm not saying that there aren't staff
Well,
members, and there are.
But how do we get there? We this happened decades ago when you had this is where an anti-biblical approach to the faith where it was shoved down people's throat. Christianity was never forced on anybody. You were persuaded into it, which ironically, it's not ironic. It's very intentional how this country is set up. As we always talk about, there's two ways to govern people, right? By force or by persuasion. This country chose persuasion. Right?
As its ideal.
As its ideal, right? Yeah. To say we have it's a constitutional republic. We have representative government, and so I'm persuading you to vote for me, and we're persuading others to go our way, and we're going to make a decision. We're voting, and then we're going that way. This is a system of persuasion,
not coercion.
Correct.
Right.
Persuasion, not coercion, and not force.
Sure.
And same with Christianity. It's not coercion. God can't lie. The one that said God can do anything. No, he can't. God can't murder, and he can't lie. If there's a killing, it's a justifiable killing, meaning there's no spilling of innocent blood, and he can't lie.
True enough.
It's not his character. He's truth. He is truth, and so Christianity is set up. It obviously was promulgated that way, also persuading people. Revelations 3:15-20. Jesus is knocking on the door. He's not kicking it open. He's not threatening you. If you don't, I'm going to go to hell. I mean, he's knocking. He says, if you open the door, I'll come in and dine with you. It's conditional.
Yes.
And I love that. I mean, because then that's when it's real. That's when no one forced the disciples to all be martyred after they saw the resurrected Christ. They all volunteered for it.
But that's Christians, right? He stands at the door and knocks on Christians' hearts, right?
He's talking to the church in Revelations 3. Yeah. I mean, but he's offering it. He's offering everybody. He's knocking on everyone's heart. Actually, he's pursuing. Right. He's pursuing everybody. He's asking for everybody to let him in. Yeah, come to me, all you are weary, and I'll give you rest. And so the invitation is to everybody.
Because we're image bearers.
Right? Absolutely. Absolutely. All I'm saying is there was a period of time where I think Christianity got goofy. Like I said, I mean, if there's one thing I could do, man, if somebody could get me on, if someone can get me on with Joe Rogan, man, give me 2 or 3 hours of that sumbitch. I mean, I would just love to. Just reason with him. I was very disappointed when you sent that, Jeff. I didn't even watch it because I would have been too irritated when Stephen Meyer, I heard,
Jeff,
was on with Joe Rogan.
Stephen C. Meyer.
Yeah, who's a brilliant dude.
Discovery Institute.
Brilliant
Very cool
dude.
Guy.
But and I'll watch it. I'll force myself to watch. It's going to irritate me because I would be like, tag me, put me in, coach. But
just so everybody knows, Stephen C. Meyer is the director of the Center for Science and Culture at Discovery Institute. Yeah, he is a sharp, brilliant
dude.
Mind, but he was out of his element.
But doesn't mean he can verbally.
He was a little starstruck.
He was what?
He was a little starstruck.
He was starstruck, but he wasn't prepared. It sounds like for the antagonism. He should have been for the antagonism.
I think maybe
he has written some of the most powerful and influential and well-written books.
And he presents well when it's a one-way presentation.
I sincerely think I did this y'all at sidebar. I sincerely think he thought he would persuade Joe because Joe has always said Christians are stupid because they don't believe in the Big Bang. And then he presents the Big Bang, and then all of a sudden Joe turns it and says, well, maybe the Big Bang didn't happen. So then all of a sudden,
but Joe was not willing to engage at the level where Stephen C. Meyer is effective because Joe wouldn't go there.
But Stephen let him off the hook.
That's exactly right.
You say, you ain't going anywhere, Jack. Yeah. You come in here, let's talk here. So it sounds like he took a very submissive role because he was the invited guest.
I think he's an exceptional writer. He's a great lecturer. He is not a very good debater.
Well, obviously.
And I think All right, already. My goodness
Well,
gracious.
man, just
anyway, the guy is, he just put out a book. He's put out some fantastic books. Darwin's Doubt is a fantastic book. The latest one that he just wrote was Return to the God Hypothesis. Return to the God Hypothesis. It is an unbelievably stimulating but I've watched
a lot of his
but I don't think Joe Rogan
videos. And look, and it's like Hugh Ross too. They get a little deep, man. They're not good at communicating the message. You know, I think that's what made, and whether people like me to say, love Ravi Zacharias effective, because he's like, that made sense, and he's talking normal, and you can tell he's ridiculously intelligent. Wherever he was with his faith and what he believed, and I understand the end of what happened before he passed on. I get all that.
More philosophical,
but it was philosophical. He met people in the battle of the mind and the logic and the reasoning, and he reasoned people, and he was very persuasive, and he could banter, and he was back and forth, and he challenged people. He didn't take the piñata mentality, but he wasn't overbearing. I mean, look, he was good. Michael Ramsden is very good. I mean, there's other people out there that are good, but they just don't have the momentum behind them, you know.
See, this is the problem, though. You got to be constantly entertaining today. This is what you're competing with. Back to screen time.
But Joe's not entertaining. I mean, he's just conversating. He's talking. He's laughing.
I agree. I don't think so either. But Joe started his podcast a while ago. He's like the pioneer, right? He's one of the oldest guys around in terms of podcasts.
2007.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, the iPhone.
Are you kidding me? Right? Exactly. It's ancient history in terms of social media.
Yeah,
literally ancient history in terms of social media. He's been doing it the longest, and he's a pioneer, and he gets the benefit of that. Because I don't think he's that entertaining either.
That doesn't necessarily mean. I mean, there's organizations that have been around 20 years and they have 3 people in them.
That's true, brother, but don't underestimate the power of habit, right?
Well, he had the help that he was a UFC guy and the comedian and all that stuff.
Jeff, you're right. I think you're 100% right.
He's had great guests.
But what I think is fascinating, they're just having real, raw conversations, right? He just talks the way he talks. Right. He uses the vernacular he uses.
Asks questions everybody's thinking.
He asks questions. He's open. He's curious. Yep. He doesn't act like a know-it-all. I mean, he has his opinions. He's not afraid to change course. And he just has conversations. And a lot of them aren't entertaining conversations. Yep. They're just conversations. I mean, I don't watch them on a regular basis. I only watch them when there's a topic that interests me, and I can't watch 3 hours all the way through. I watch the little mini, whatever micro content that people send me. But all I'm saying is, I wish we had a kind of push, multiple people doing that with a Christian podcast. I really do. I wish we had that out there. People that had really a lot of steam underneath their
topics. Joe Rogan's going to talk about things that the mass majority of Christians and organized Christianity don't even go near. We're not comfortable talking about.
I agree, 100%.
And so he's carved out a pretty broad niche because he'll go anywhere. He'll talk about anything. During the COVID era, he became insanely popular. I'm sure he accumulated millions of new listeners, I'm assuming, when he challenged the narrative coming from the White House on COVID, particularly as it pertains to vaccines. I mean, we've talked in here on Sidebar on Saturday morning about his interview with RFK Jr. I mean, he gave him 3 hours. Mm-hmm. And he allowed RFK Jr. to talk about things that people have probably never heard ever, articulated very, very well.
But he set the tone by saying, I've changed my position on this.
Yeah.
So he set the tone, and he says, no one's ever given you an opportunity. And then, so Joe was affected by something. And which is how it usually works. Or a bunch
of some things.
But how it usually works, right? People, I mean, I've had people that said, oh, I regret taking this, or I regret doing that, or whatever. And then, so they've changed their opinion. So you're entitled to do that. So he set the tone, then he let Bobby just go.
But I love that he had Bobby on, because Bobby, I think he also had, I'm assuming he had Malone on, didn't he?
He did in the past, yes. And McCullough. Yeah. Look, he was a pioneer on that shit. Yeah. I mean, that guy had the brass balls by saying, look, I'm big enough. I mean, he didn't say it, but he showed it. I'm big enough to say, screw you. I'm having these people on. These are conversations that need to be had. Now think about Joe. He's unique. So he's a comedian. So every comedian by default has to be a free speech defender. They're comedians. What are you going to do? I mean, by definition, a comedian goes in areas that are off limits and off topics to stimulate your mind, to push the envelope, to make jokes out of
they
people.
Specialize in making the offensive funny.
Yeah,
and getting us to laugh at ourselves.
Yeah,
and that's the problem. We have a spirit in the country right now. It's decidedly authoritarian and totalitarian. People can't even laugh anymore. They can't. They genuinely can't have a good laugh. We used to be able to laugh at stereotypes because there's always an element of truth in stereotypes. That's why they're funny. I mean, whether you're talking about white people, whether you're talking about black people, whether you're talking about, what was the term? They don't use it anymore. It used to be called Oriental. Can't say that anymore.
Why
now
not?
it's Asian.
Why not?
I don't know. I've heard it said.
What's wrong with Oriental?
Who knows?
Because they set the rules.
You can't keep up with the latest censorship target. You just can't. But this is the point. Comedians didn't care about that. You try to censor a good comedian.
It's funny. Do you say that? Well, Dave Chappelle tells everybody to piss off. Andrew Schultz tells everybody to piss off.
As you should.
Bill Burr tells everybody to piss. Look, I know these aren't people that maybe a lot of Christians don't listen to. I think all these people are funny.
But there's a point in
They're
there.
all funny.
Because you're saying Christians, we need a Christian Joe Rogan.
Yes.
So you're coming 100%. Back to that. Go ahead.
Thank you, George. Thank you for the redirect. Yeah, 100%. We don't have that. And we've got to be able to do that. So all these comedians, by default, like Bill Maher even, he's almost a free speech absolutist.
Yeah.
Which is great. But that allowed Joe to have these conversations. I wish Joe would have a very capable Christian apologist. I'm going to tell you who I told you guys, Dave Rubin had Frank Turek on. And Frank used to irritate me because he tries to be funny. And I know what he's trying to do. But man, I'm just more of a raw funny. I like raw humor. Obviously R-rated Christianity. But I mean, look, all of Frank's college talks, presentations, talking off the cuff.
They're very good.
They're good. They're informative. They're insightful. I've refined my, thought process and logic over the years. And Frank's helped. He did if you guys can watch Dave Rubin from the Rubin Report.
Yep.
And Frank Turek, it was only 30 minutes, right? 20 something minutes. Frank was poised. He wasn't trying to be funny. He knew his audience. He was prepared for the moment. I wish a Frank Turek went on with Joe Rogan. Mm-hmm. I think Frank would knock it out of the park. I really do.
Have y'all seen?
Unless Rogan goes after cosmology and Genesis.
He's got enough to banter with. He's got enough to banter with him. I've heard Frank. I mean, he's not going to give a Hugh Ross or Stephen Meyer answer, but Joe couldn't handle it. Most people could be like, "What the hell did you just say?"
Till he pulls out the Ken Ham and says that it's okay for dinosaurs to be on the ark.
But Frank doesn't believe that.
Oh, okay.
I
have not heard, and please send me a video.
Well, I'm not going to go.
No, seriously. It's a nice question. If anyone can find a Frank Turek presentation or video where he is crystal clear about his positions on Genesis 1, seriously.
No, you know what he said? I've heard the video. I can't find it because I don't have a library of it. He says, look, it's not an issue. This is a family fight. Whether you're a young earth or an old earth, I don't think there's anything wrong with believing that there's an old earth. And that's where he tends to lean, he says. But if you have a young earth, he's talking to an audience of a diverse people that are usually talking about other things. That's usually a question from the audience on the Q&A after. Yeah. I've heard him answer that question. He leans, he goes, I don't want to use words because I don't have it memorized. He leans old earth, but he goes, there's nothing, you can believe whichever one you want. It's not a salvation issue, which you and I have talked about. Young earth, old earth is not a salvation issue. People in ape shit when we tell people we're old earth people.
Yep.
And when we believe that Genesis supports that, if you properly handle the hermeneutics, and people lose their shit over it. And
I changed my mind.
And thank you, Jeff. Thank you for saying that. You were,
yes, that's right.
And it wasn't about, I don't care what it is. If it's young, it's young. If it's old, it's old. All I care about is God's character. I care about his credibility. Age of the earth is not a salvation issue. To me, it's a credibility issue. Because as you and I have pointed out, George, numerous times, those 70, 85% of kids in college, when they walk away, you already know where I'm going with this. They walk into a science class or whatever damn class, and they go, if you're a Christian, you have a chance to drop out because you're not going to be a Christian. But, so you're a Christian, huh? Oh, yes, sir. You believe in a young earth, huh? And then they just annihilate them on what they believe is on old earth, on science. Yep. In fact, and they're like, shit. I look like a fool. I guess I was wrong about Genesis.
Also not a fair
That's right.
fight.
That's right. That's exactly what happens.
I'm not really a Christian anymore. I'm more spiritual. Right. Why? because you guys were wrong about Genesis.
I'm open-minded.
You're probably wrong about Jesus. Let me just keep an open mind. I'm spiritual, though. Don't worry. I'm spiritual.
Don't worry.
What the hell does that mean? And so that's why I'm so passionate about it now. Why I push back. And whether it was Henry, I think it was a couple weeks ago. It's not that I'm mad about it. I'm passionate about it because guess what? We're losing. The needle's moving away from us. And until we can handle this stuff, if we don't understand the rules of engagement and we don't know where's the water coming from? What does it matter? It's coming from over here. No, it's coming. No, don't worry about that. I want to stay focused on the front. Well, you can stay focused on the front all you want. The water's coming in from the back. You're going to be underwater in a little while. And that's my mindset.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm a strategist.
Yeah.
I want to do my best to win for heaven. I want to be obedient as a soldier for God. And I want to make sure that I'm trying to win hearts and minds, as Matthew 28:19 tells us. Direct everybody to Jesus because I'm jacked up. I'm just a little less jacked up than yesterday. And I'm looking at Jesus as my example. And I want to 2 Timothy 2:15, 1 Peter 3:15 and 16. I want to do our best to properly handle the word of truth, not be embarrassed about it, always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks why we have the hope in Christ Jesus. Period. End of story. That's what it's about for me. I litigate for a living. I want to litigate for heaven. Yeah. And we're not doing that, George.
No, we're not. And this is, one of the things we do here is a call to action to pastors, to church leaders, to do something about this. Part of the data that motivated the topic tonight is the fact that from the CDC to individual universities are reporting that kids are depressed as hell.
Yep.
So the average teen, according to the CDC, about 60% as of 2023, I think the report was printed on May 9th or March 9th of this year. The CDC said that 60% of teens have experienced persistent sadness and hopelessness, which are known in clinical psychology to be markers for depressive states, anxiety, illegal drug use, suicidal ideation, and attempted suicide. 60%, it's 60%, particularly around teen girls. It's like 3 out of 5 teen girls, and it's 57% overall. That's insane. And this is, they've sort of looked at the line, this trend line from about 2009, Nico. And what they're seeing is that a significant factor behind that is people who spend 3 hours in front of their screen or more, a minimum of 3 hours. Because they looked at that population because those trends were going down, they were going down in virtually every single demographic. But among teens, where screen time hits 3 hours or more
a day,
yes, it's literally doubled from 2009.
In
depression.
And what are they saying the cause is? Just because you feel like you have no purpose in life, because you haven't accomplished anything, that you feel worthless, or what's the deal?
Yeah, they're not having relationships with real people. They're not able to, like the things that you were saying. You interact with people, you have ups and downs, you work things out, and in the process,
you laugh.
In the process, you get to basically see what you're made of, right? You have your own identity.
Yeah,
and all of that is getting erased because you're basically interacting
with a robot,
with anime. Right,
what's
Jack?
that?
I mean, you're basically interacting with avatars. I mean, you're basically interacting with fake people. And you can turn off these fake people, like we said at the top of the show. That's not reality. So they're living in la la land.
But the irony is that people get turned off. Their minds, when I deal with young people and I see people in the justice system, and I mean, there's no common sense. There's no eye contact. There's no confidence when they walk into a room.
That's right.
There's no personality. There's no critical thinking.
Intimacy. There's no one-on-one intimacy with another human being. I mean, they're almost hollowed out.
It's not. It's not all of them. I want to be clear. And then, but then when you meet a kid, when you meet a young person that has, you think that they're, the next gift to the world, and it's like you're just a normal kid in the old days. Look, there's that. I don't know if I showed it to you, Jeff. I think I sent it to you guys. It's on an Instagram thing. It's like, what is it called? Old pics or historic pics?
Yes.
On Instagram.
Yes. Yeah.
I love it. I'm fascinated. The old video from 1890s, 1870s, 1920s,
like
1910s. Remember that one I sent you with this video where these kids were looking on the street in New York or wherever they were, and they're wearing different clothes. I love the clothes they're wearing differently. And they're all looking. They all had different looks on their face. They must have been 9 to 14. All walking the streets. wise street kids, but not like the street kids of today where they're jacking and stabbing people and shooting up drugs. But they're working, they're merchants, they're working, they're trying to sell papers, they're hustling, they're learning the value of $1, they're trying to make a buck. Some doing it illegally, some doing it legally, but
that's right.
They're people of the streets, and they have a different look in their eye. They're not these little pansy ass, and they don't know what. I mean, they're looking at you with intent and purpose.
Yeah,
I mean, they look like little adults. These are little young adults. You know, we always talk about.
I mean, they're living in the real world.
Yes.
With solving real problems. A lot of them had to work just to help the family put food on the table. You're going back to the early 20th century, I'm assuming, here when you see those pictures.
Yeah.
Right? 1900s and stuff.
Yeah,
early 1900s.
I'll look for it in a second.
And so it wasn't unusual unless you came from an affluent family. You were part of the family workforce. You had to get your ass out there at age 12. And you had to go to work.
They must have filmed it on little 8mm film reels or something.
But what's the big difference there? They're not. I mean, they're discovering their identity in the real world, solving real problems. When a kid goes into this world, this is a fake world. You're interacting. Think about it. The people who are interacting with you. I mean, we don't stop and think about this. The people who are interacting with you are showing you their best. These aren't real people.
Yeah.
Nobody puts, at least not deliberately, and then when you're a teen, no one's going to deliberately put their worst on the screen. They're going to put their best. This is a fake version of whoever.
Right. And so they restored the color on
even the people who are actually real are not real because you're getting the best version. When you're interacting with someone spontaneously in the real world, you get the good and the bad at the speed of light.
Yeah,
and you have to react to that. So the difference is, in the early 1900s, you weren't forming your identity in a vacuum. Now you are. You're being given the impossible task of self-identification. And that's not how we're designed. We were placed in families with parents and siblings and with lots of effing problems in many cases. And you have to interact and you have to engage. And you have to work through that. You don't get any of that in here. And so the second you pull away, a real person is instantly boring.
Yeah.
Also,
because you can't turn them off.
Yeah.
A lot of these young men they're so addicted to pornography and all the expletive content.
That's the other problem
on the phones,
the actual content,
that they don't know how to court a woman or take her out on a date, or and they don't treat her right, or sometimes they have a bastardized view of sex and they don't know how, so they're not getting married. Millennials and young people aren't getting really married anymore. So
they don't feel there's a need to. They don't understand the sacredness of a marriage. They don't realize that God uses that as an avenue to work through that marriage to bring each spouse closer to Christ.
That's a big ass leap.
Yep.
To go from not having any relationships, any meaningful relationships that fill life with meaning and purpose and joy, and then all of a sudden you get married, right? That's going to go really, really well.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're finding. We're finding that there's this with all of these wonderful gadgets to transfer information, we have never communicated less. And where it's particularly worse is teens. And so this is a real charge. I mean, for pastors, I don't hear this really being discussed in churches. Parents are looking for help. I mean, they're actually going to Congress. You and I were talking about parents are looking to Congress for help to legislate a solution.
Yeah,
they want social media companies to basically require anyone who is a teenager to get their permission before they can open any kind of account, for instance. And because the age is ridiculously low. I think it's age 13 where virtually anybody can
lie to get on there anyway. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's no mechanism for the company.
Right.
And then there's the legal hurdles. I mean, how are you going to hold a company accountable legally? I mean, they almost have to say that they knew that this kid was actually older than a certain age,
right,
and chose to blow it off anyway to give the kid an account. So anyway, the point is that the parents are, to the tune of 80% of parents are now looking to Congress for a solution. That's a real slippery slope.
Well, it's not going to happen. I mean, there's no way. I mean, I can't imagine legally how you get there. But that just, what you're doing is you're handing over parenting to someone else, to the government, which people claim that they don't want. Wow. But they're my kid. Well, then treat like it's your kid. Yeah. I mean, then put controls on the phone. Tell them to be home. But parenting is hard work, and I'm not saying I do it perfectly. And we're still in it. I mean, you're further along into it than we are, George. But Maya turns 15 And I'm proud of who she is. I'm not saying she's perfect. Of course not. I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And we're going to continue to go through this. But we keep the communication lines open. Mm-hmm. We keep close reins on them. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to, we talk about trafficking. And there's nothing off limits with her. And the group tomorrow, I warned the parents, I'm coming after your kid's mind. Don't send them. Don't send them. I'm trying to.
I'm going to preach to them.
Well, and it's going to be raw. I mean, I don't know if you want to walk around in a PG-rated, bubble.
Yeah, and if you've been avoiding a topic, chances are we'll talk about it.
Yeah, man.
We'll bring it up.
I want to meet the kids where they're at, but then reshape their thoughts biblically and lead them. I want to direct them to Christ as the answer, because He is the answer to everything. John 14:6. He's the way, the truth, and the life. He's everything. We don't look at Him as the life. We look at Him as the lifeguard. Yeah. He has to save our ass because we're always in a shithole. He's the life.
Yes.
We can't live it, obviously. With the Holy Spirit, we get His record, but we're always striving. We're striving, looking at Him as our example. That's what I want to do. I want to direct these, and you can do it. And you don't have to be. I can't stand when people think you have to do some prudish, goofy, corny, unrelatable bullshit Christian. I don't understand what that. That's not what I read in Scripture. I'm reading some raw dudes, man, right. and Rahab and prostitutes and craziness, and God's refurbishing people, and He's not freaking out. And I want people to know that we have to reclaim sex, we have to reclaim marriage, we have to reclaim manhood and womanhood, and purpose in life. And there's a real way to do it.
Sure there is.
Real practical, real raw.
Sure there is.
And so what we tell not our children, because it's really only Maya, that sex is God's design. It's beautiful and should be enjoyed between a husband and wife in the confines of a biblically centered marriage.
Yep.
Period. End of story.
Amen.
And it's nothing ugly or dirty. It's just not appropriate. Mm-hmm. And at the right time, it will be enjoyed in its full nature with Christ at the center, and pleasurable. I mean, the period. It's not that. It's not crazy to me. Sure. I don't know why the church freaks out and you can't. Let's not talk about sex or just talk about sex. Talk about everything. God's not freaking out over stuff, but when the church avoids something, as we always say, the enemy invades it. So the church avoids, the enemy invades. So over the years, when the church said, I want to talk about sex, the enemy's like, I will. I'll redefine it for you. I don't really want to talk about marriage. I'll redefine it for you. I don't want to talk about this. Okay, I'll talk about it. I don't want to be not liked. Great. I'm going to be liked because I'm going to tell them what they want to hear, and you're a dumbass. No, and here we are.
If pastors aren't training and discipling their flocks and exposing them to the truth of God's word on all kinds of so-called controversial topics, and then parents aren't training and discipling their kids and exposing them to the truth of God's word as it pertains to these topics, somebody's going to do it.
Yeah,
100%.
It's not that it's not going to happen. It's going to do it. And yes, that's right. The data clearly shows a lot of it is happening already in high schools, but particularly as they go, at least in high school, they get to come home to you, even though it's very difficult as a parent to compete with an hour, maybe, right? When the kid's at school, he's at school 8 hours a day, 7-8 hours a day, comes home. You might have an hour with them. Yeah. Most of the conversation, especially when hit the teen years, are like super short.
What's up?
Hey, how was your day? Fine. So what'd you do? Nothing.
Yeah. What'd you learn?
We don't allow that. I want full sentences and I want descriptive sentences. Don't say nothing, because that's a lie. You didn't do nothing, because if you did nothing, what the hell kind of a school did I just send you to?
I want my refund.
So we want actually an explanation and require that of your kids. You don't have to be a jackass. Just require that kids. Wait a minute. What did you actually do? Walk me through your day. Tell me. If you think it's boring, assume I'm not bored, and just walk me through your day. Engage your kid. Teach them how to talk through things. That's your job as a mother and a father, to train, to disciple, and to expose your kid to the truth of God's word as it pertains to every single topic. Because when they hit their first year in college,
every single topic.
When Nico said, when they hit their first year in college, I can't think of a single university, and yes, sadly, even major Christian universities, who don't have what's called general education courses. That's right. Diversity, equity, and inclusion at its best. And what they're going to do is, especially if a kid is a Christian, is they're going to teach those kids that their parents are a bunch of dickheads who don't know anything. They're probably racist, bigoted, homophobic. All the labels will come out. And when it gets to the science, the kid will hear what an intellectual moron they are. You, as parents, That's what they're going to hear. And they're going to spend a lot of tax dollars unteaching what you've taught. And when you get your kid back, it's going to sound very differently than what he sounded when he went back. And yeah, a lot of them losing their faith. They're walking away from it. And a lot of it has to do because they don't want to be the odd man out. They haven't been taught how to defend their faith. Yeah. They don't know what they believe. They don't know how to defend it, because there are people who know what they believe, but they don't know how to defend it. That's a whole other issue. That's apologetics. There's hope for that.
Yeah, it's a different group.
There's plenty. And by the way, please write into the show if you guys are looking for sources. We got plenty of them, really good sources that you can walk through with your kid that helps them think about those topics of, hey, who is God? And if God exists, why is it the God of the Bible versus some other God? Why should I believe him? And if he does exist, then what should be my response to him?
No, I'm not trying to derail your thought. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was going to say, that's your job. And it's the pastor's job, really, and the elders to be looking out for the congregation as it pertains to these issues, because it's all about the Great Commission, isn't it? We're not just here to go to church. We're here to be vessels of redemption. Really, we're here to shepherd people in the good news. We have to know what we believe. If the culture's falling apart on issues of transgenderism, gender identity, if they're falling apart on those issues, we have to engage on those issues. We have to be able to interact. And we don't. We run away from that. Somebody's going to fill that vacuum.
Nico,
Go ahead.
I wish that when I was a teenager, 13, 14, that my parents took the time to give the speech that you gave to your daughter, because my parents avoided talking about it. It was only mostly my mom avoided it, but when they avoided talking about it, I sought it out, and that's where I gave
someone's going to answer.
I gave the devil. Basically I gave the devil a foothold to get me ensnared in a very bad addiction to pornography and all these other things. And I feel like if I was told, hey, there's nothing wrong with it, it's designed by God, we
went through a book. I don't know where Davi got it, called The Purity Code. It's a tough read for a daddy with a daughter, and so I read ahead, just like, I don't know if she was ready for this. She was 12, and I knew for sure that the world, she hadn't heard about sex before us. When I don't want to say who these people are, but when a couple who's close to our family, they ended up getting married, but they got pregnant before they got married. And then I said, that's not God's design, hon, baby. And she goes, Papi, it's not the girl's name, the female's name. It's not her fault she got pregnant. And I said, well, it kind of actually is. and so then I was like, oh shit, okay, well good. I'm glad that she doesn't know. But yet I said, now I have to act. I got to jump in. So I talked to Davi. We started reading through the Purity Code. What are you going to do? I got to fill that vacuum. 100%.
Somebody's going to do it.
And now she knows, and we talk, and I enjoy being around Maya. She's funny, she's nurturing, she's loving, because she helps raise Michael.
Yeah.
We have a son on the spectrum of autism, as most of you guys know, and she's just a neat girl. She's not perfect, and she's working, but she has so much potential, and I see the Lord working through her, and I think she's going to be a powerhouse. Mm-hmm. Look, we're all biased on our kids, but then they all have unique talents. Mm-hmm. And she's got, she's being the oldest, the nurturing, the motherly role, helping raise her brother, and the Lord's using all of it, George. And so how do you get that? How do you keep that in perspective? I don't know where I would be without a biblical worldview.
She already is a very impressive young woman.
Yes.
And but this is the point. You can see the seeds of good parenting germinate. You can see that. And I don't want to make good parents feel bad. There's a lot of really good parents who do a lot of great work, and their kids tend to stray for a while.
Look at me.
It happens.
I mean, look, I was selling drugs.
Look at me. Me too. I mean, holy crap. And it happens. And it happens by God's grace. Everything will work out by his grace. But you could see it. You can see tangible differences between parents, family dynamics where parents are actively engaged. I'm not talking about smothering your kids. Let your kids have their own thoughts. Let them be honest. Let them say things that are really uncomfortable. We've heard some very uncomfortable things from our kids. We have. When they're going through conflict. During the COVID era, that was a real a real reset time for my kids, Nico, because a lot of their so-called friends kicked them in the ass and turned on them.
Yeah.
And this was very, very hard and slow and painful with my kids because, they're human. They have formed attachments. They had made assumptions about the quality of their friendships, and this was a real tough lesson for them. And so we were there. We engaged with them. If we hadn't been there, they're going to find consolation somewhere else. They're going to find answers, bullshit answers to their problems somewhere else. Somebody's going to fill that vacuum, and it's going to set them on a wrong trajectory. And it'll be, who knows how long it'll take to get them back. Yeah. And so we're blessed.
And what happens
grateful.
In that time? What happens? Do they make that poor choice? Is it that poor choice?
Is it that poor choice?
Right. And I deal with those things all the time. And so I'm so sensitive to it. I'm so focused on it, almost militant about it. And I pray for wisdom all the time. Look, man, we've already gone an hour here. We could keep with this topic. This topic about worldview, George, and biblical literacy. You and I can talk for hours about this stuff because it encompasses everything. It will affect the way you look at marriage, abortion, politics, friendship, gender, border, family, friends, conflict, success, setbacks, everything.
Yep, everything.
Your biblical literacy or illiteracy affects, as we say, your worldview. And everything I just said was the description of what a worldview is. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it's so important for us. We're talking about how the world is so screwed up and America is so screwed up and we've gotten away from our ideals. What are our ideals? Like I said on Sidebar, we go from 1956. I think you said it started in 54 when they petitioned Congress. In 1956, the culture of this country was so embedded in this country, in God we trust, we put it in our exchange of value. Mm-hmm. Don't forget, this is what we believe. In God we trust. And now here we are, and because it's been happening for decades now, way less than 70 years. I mean, arguably 40 or 50 years removed from that, when it really started taking hold. It just wasn't as, because of all this crap, it gets out quicker. We're everything but that. Mm-hmm. It's in anything but God we trust. Sure. It's literally in anything but God, not in God we trust. Yeah. And so, and how did we get there? And we've talked about how we got there. Weak church.
We're dangerously close to no longer being a majority.
Oh yeah.
That actually even identify themselves as Christians. Yeah. Because that's not a consolation for us. Somebody who identifies himself with Christianity, that doesn't bring me comfort because they usually don't know what the hell that means.
Right.
And when we probe, and all of these analyses show just a little bit of probing exposes just how clueless they are about what Christianity really is. And that's our heart. If you want to know, I mean, we didn't really spend a lot of time because this is very personal. So we're not going to tell you what to do with regard to screen time. It is something that you have to watch out for. Monitor your kids' time. Do keep it to a minimum until they're at least 18, an adult. Keep it to an absolute minimum. And when they are on their screen, know what they're engaging with and talk to them about it. Yeah, that means you got to put your own damn phone down and you got to take the time to talk to them. It really will make a huge difference because if you don't parent them, if you don't raise them, this thing will.
Yeah. So
can I ask one question?
Go ahead.
Because you were talking about.
Is there any comments that we have to address? I mean, you know.
No, just a lot of people just giving their support. Someone did ask about, can you do a topic on systematic theology? Sure. Would you guys be interested in that?
It'll have to be a multi-series. We'll just say, Deborah said, an overview in one show, but
Deborah, in regards to your Christian college, she said, Deborah said, Abilene Christian is good.
Let's talk about what good means, and then I'll shut up. This is very important. Go on their website and look up and see whether there's a diversity, equity, and inclusion office. If there is, you got a problem. You just do. You really, really, really do. The college is slipping away from Christian distinctives. Check it out. I mean, it has no choice but to do that. They're going to start talking about issues of justice, issues of gender, issues of race, through another prism that is decidedly unbiblical. And that's the problem. And it won't be long before they start looking at everything through that lens. Look up to see if they have a diversity, equity, inclusion office, and then look to see how many officers are in there. because you're at a point right now where virtually every school has one. The only one that I know that actually doesn't have one, and maybe I need to get out more, is Hillsdale College in Michigan. They actually don't have a DEI office. They refuse to have one, and they're good for them. They are a Christian school. I would check that out and then look to see how many officers are in there, and then figure out what the ratio of the DEI officers is to their other staff. Because some of these schools have so many people in their DEI office that it actually trumps other major disciplines. It's insane. And so I don't know about Abilene. I haven't checked them out recently, but do that little bit of homework. If a school has a DEI office, and you absolutely have to send the kid there, or you've prayed and you decided that it's okay to send the kid there, check that ratio out. Make sure that it's a small ratio between DEI officers and the rest of staff.
Iris on YouTube actually just replied and said, our son graduated from TLU in Seguin, and they are off the rails and believe in universal salvation.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Nothing like
I know someone who went to a seminary in Austin that half of their professors were universalists and all these different things.
It seems like all the brilliant minds that you went to school with there and learned from
Biola.
and Biola,
yeah.
They, and I'm not being disrespectful. I don't know if I wish they just had.
Well,
I wish they trained up somebody.
Let me just be honest. Biola has a DEI office, and then so the issue again is back to that ratio.
What?
But it's California. I'm not shocked.
And this is a problem. This is a serious
What
problem. Absolutely,
George.
I'm telling you, brother.
Are they progressive?
You want to talk about? Oh, absolutely not. No, they're not there yet. But look, I'm not naive. I mean, this
Isn't
is going.
the dean a very controversial person? The new dean of Biola.
Long story. Talbot School of Theology. This is a culture. You're pretty soon going to have a cultural rift in that school. The school can't serve two masters, Nico.
Yep.
That's the point. They're going to have to decide what kind of a university are we going to be. Biola University has been a true powerhouse, and they're going to lose that if they keep playing with fire, in my view. Fortunately, the ratio of DEI officers to other academic staff is rather minimal. How long will that be that way?
Yeah.
I mean, they need to get that. First of all, they need to purge the school of that shit. Get rid of that. I pray to God the schools come to the senses, they repent for that bullshit and get those DEI offices. They defund those things. And if you've got a president or administrative staff that's pushing for it, you really need to have a serious come to Jesus moment and put those people on the train. It is a matter of life and death for that university.
Wow, what a shame.
But churches are playing the fire too.
I get
It's
it.
not just
Lucy
university.
Castillo said, imagine the words "in God we trust" will go away once it goes to digital currency.
Well, that's true.
That's a scary thought.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. Hope it helped you critically think through some of these issues and encourage you to engage in conversations. Look, I think the worst advice we got, at least I got growing up, some of the worst advice was, in public, don't talk about religion and politics, right? Politics, as we always talk about, is just what do you believe? What are you advocating for? Religion is what you believe, and politics is what are you advocating for? We should be able to talk about what we believe and what we're advocating for. Everybody else is, so why can't Christians? But do you do it properly? Are we doing it boldly? Can we give answers? Can we go back and forth like Paul did in Acts and give an apologia for why we're Christians and what Christ has done in our lives? It's important. It's changed my life. I'm never going to be ashamed of Jesus. He wasn't ashamed of me. And when I studied what he went through, the historical fact that atheists will have to admit what that first century Jew did and that man that hung on the cross, I'm fully persuaded is God incarnate, without a doubt, without hesitation. And I can defend it, but hopefully I do my best to live it out every day until he calls me home. So God bless you guys. Share this with someone you think might enjoy it. And God willing,
join us on Sidebar.
Sidebar. Thanks a lot.
Join us on Sidebar on Saturday mornings on 1200 WOAI from 9 to,
I don't know, 11. I just go until I tell you to stop.
We're on Facebook at the same time, so it's 9 to 11.
This is the
Facebook
Portuguese
and
YouTube.
YouTube.
All right, guys.
We don't know what we're doing.
Just show up. All right, guys. God bless you.
Yeah.